It is 12 o'clock, the time of the witching hour. Oh! Welcome to the Halloween episode of the Geekeasy!
Wow, that was quite a unique introduction there. And, hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Geekeasy here on this spooky, creepy Halloween night. And the spookiest and creepiest people possibly in the world right now you're actually listening to. I'm Adam Stephen Kelly, and I am joined, as always, by the devious and devilish Dr. Karen Oughton.
Absolutely.
My God. Well, we're back.
Well, just slightly back anyway. Watch your back at least, Halloween. I got stabby things, it's great.
You've always got stabby things.
So what can we expect for tonight, my darling?
Well, we have an amazing interview with an up-and-coming Swedish filmmaker whose horror film, of course, this is, being Halloween, we have to talk about horror films. We have the writer-director of the Swedish horror film MARIANNE. We're going to be talking to him about the inspiration for his film and actually about Swedish culture and folklore. So it's a very, very interesting and intriguing interview with Filip Tegstedt.
Absolutely. It's very interesting from a perspective of looking at different cultures, because the Swedes take their folklore very seriously in certain parts of the country. And it's kind of a nice way to see how different beliefs are across the world. And believe me, it's genuinely very, very scary. And it's a type of thing, just trust me, tonight, when you go to bed, keep the light on. Please, you're going to need it.
Absolutely. And as well as our interview with Filip, we're going to be expressing our thoughts and memories of Halloween and what Halloween means to us. And, well, for a lot of people, it's dressing up in silly, possibly terrifying costumes. And actually, you dressed up just last Sunday, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I must admit, in my day job, when I'm lecturing, I have to be reasonably formal. When I'm not, I have a little bit of a party. And I'm like a kid in the dressing up box. It's great. So I had the pleasure last weekend of co-hosting the Classic Horror Campaign's screening at the Roxy Bar in London Bridge. And we were doing a screening of Carnival of Souls and The Blood on Satan's Claw. Now, me being me, I wanted to get into the spirit of this, so I went as a mixture of essentially like a fairground carnival ringmaster, ringmistress type thing. So kind of reasonably sexy. We're talking a little bit of animal print here. But then, with The Blood on Satan's Claw, I thought, sod it. For once, I want to see if we can get into the spirit of things a bit. So I got my ever-loving brother, who is a live-action role player, to send me up a wolf costume. And, yeah. And I decided I was going to do the jumper outer thing of waiting till the film was at the end and literally in a darkened cinema shooting down in all the blackened rows in a mask that I couldn't see a thing out of. Seriously, I couldn't see a bloody thing. And I was on high heels, so I couldn't run too much. But I was in this kind of black kind of cowling thing with the silliest claws you've ever seen in your whole life, with a mask on, which in fairness, the chap who runs Film Bar 70, Justin Harris, actually commented was slightly better than the costume that they have in the film. Going out and going into people's faces and going, "Wah!" and stuff like that. And making people jump. And then going to the front and doing wolfy things for a minute or two before taking the mask off. I'm not entirely sure what the audience thought, but this mad, slightly loopy lecturer at the front saying, "Yes, I'm a doctor, I'm serious." Not. But it seemed to go down quite nicely, and I managed not to kill myself in the process, which I was quite concerned about. But
or indeed kill any guests.
Yes, because I really was very seriously concerned that I could just go arse over tit.
either fall over or claw someone, or fall over and claw someone in the same fall.
Well, this is a silly thing. I mean, the claws themselves were attached to little kind of glove mitten things. They're quite cute, actually. But they were really, really bendy. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to have to worry too much about actually stabbing at people. Because genuinely, you've got the eye holes in this. Bear in mind, I'm very short-sighted at the best of times. I had to take my glasses off in order to put this mask on because it wouldn't sit on the glasses properly. And it's also made for... because LARPers make all of their own gear. So this was basically a handmade thing. And the eye holes were made for somebody who's a fair bit bigger than me. And you've basically got a slit that is about 3 millimeters high by about 7 millimeters wide to look out of. Pitch black cinema, don't forget. And every time I moved, the mask would shift slightly. And it was all kind of cloth. I just, so I'm kind of frantically trying to kind of claw at people and scare them a little bit. And I'm sure at one point I stuck one of my claws up some poor guy's nose. If it was you, I'm so sorry. But yes, I just at the front just kind of clawed about a bit, and then kind of did the kind of whole baying at the moon thing for a second because I thought, for Christ's sake, turn the lights on.
A bendy claw is a friend to no one.
Exactly, a bendy claw. It doesn't do much. I mean, imagine picking your nose. You can't pick your nose with a bendy claw. I mean, how would Paul Wolfie survive? It's not good. Most schools don't pick the nose. But anyway, so yes, that was lots of fun.
Yes, you were the wolf woman for one evening, and perhaps you should start lecturing, go in that wolf costume again, and I think that'd be an interesting twist on the education system. I
would do, but I think that's actually a bit of a dare because next week I'm teaching a guy how to be Louis Theroux is probably the easiest way to put it. We're going to be going around Tottenham in London, doing Louis Theroux in Tottenham, dressed as Tottenham by the people is dressed as a werewolf. Tottenham is where the riot started out in London last summer. So yeah, who is up for me doing Louis Theroux does werewolf in Tottenham? Raise your hands now. See if I manage to do it without getting arrested.
There should be like a Louis Theroux expose on werewolves.
Oh no. Oh god, there's probably werewolf communities out there as we speak. So excuse me, you're slating our belief system.
Something that's a step up from the furry community, but that's another thing for another time. Have you ever dressed up as a werewolf before? And more specifically, actually on Halloween, and not just for some, not just your Sunday best.
You're assuming that's not my Sunday best. I have never done werewolf before. In the past, I've done kind of. It's really, really strange. I went out last year to a kind of Halloween party, and I dressed up as kind of a dominatrix type Tomb Raider thing. Behave yourself, lads. But with the addition of, I basically put on some kiddie makeup incorporating cornflakes to go out as a kind of Tomb Raider-esque dom come burn victim. Which point Adam loses it. And the funny thing is, bear in mind, I'd never done this makeup before. I'm not trained in makeup at all. I had a lot of people coming to me at the club night saying, could you please look the other way because you're freaking me out. It's really interesting that people can't cope with anything that's kind of in some ways partly serious. It messes with the head. If they're seeing a sexy girlie, they expect to see her as a sexy girlie, not kind of half and half. I mean, when you think about what we see on like horror films and people like Emily Booth going out being a demon, wahaha, and licking blades and stuff, it's kept quite separate from her doing her glamour model stuff. And so when you see somebody, literally everything else about them is glamorous, and yet they've only got one slight kind of side of them that isn't, it's a really good way to really mess with the head, because when we think about, even stuff like the whole Savile thing that's come up, the whole kind of recent scandal with the TV presenter, or ex-TV presenter, dead now, Jimmy Savile, who has since been accused of a lot of crimes to do with child molestation, paedophilia. All of a sudden, people are now coming out and looking, using him as a fancy dress costume. It's like, well, what does it say about our culture? And the thing is, again, this guy always looked like this. He was, as has been said a lot in the media now, hiding within plain sight. He looked like just a complete clown, a bit of a Wally. And yet, the more and more you think of it, it just becomes really, really sinister when you think about, the entire idea of the child catcher film, say, chitty chitty bang bang. You've got to have something to lure people with. to get them to want to come to you. So it's like, yeah, I mean, that last year's costume was basically running on that kind of idea that people are more scared about what is partly real. If you're thinking of things that aren't real at all, it doesn't become scary anymore. Hence, things like Freddy Halloween costumes. We take the serious part out of them. And let's face it, Freddy, lovely Freddy Krueger, silly kind of wahaha smile. When you think about what actually came from the films, child killer. Yeah, that's funny, people. We have to sanitize it. What about you? What have you dressed up as?
Well, I haven't actually, sadly, I haven't done the kind of adult dressing up thing. Interpret that how you wish. I only sort of had costumes when I was a kid, and the only two that I can actually remember was Dracula, and I think I must have dressed up as Dracula with a cheap plasticky cape and transparent plastic fangs. They're probably toxic or something.
That'd explain a lot.
Thanks. I think I dressed up as Dracula a few times, and a mummy I remember once. But nothing. I certainly haven't dressed up with a burnt face yet.
So, what kind of Halloween traditions have you had in the past?
Well, personally, I mean, we always have a pumpkin on the table. Have to carve a pumpkin as badly as I am with a knife trying to carve a pumpkin. I just do the generic sharp teeth, mouth, and the triangle eyes. My creativity, my skills when it comes to art is very, very limited. So that's all you're going to get from me on the face of the pumpkin. Most people watch horror movies on Halloween, but I watch horror movies practically every day. So Halloween's not really it's kind of just like any other day. I mean, my life's always filled with horror, so Halloween is every day in my life. But I would love, however, if Halloween in the UK was like it was in the States, because about 8 years ago now, I can't believe it's been that long, but I was in the States for Halloween, and it's literally a month-long celebration over there. Yeah. And it's absolutely incredible. So since experiencing that in the States, I've kind of perhaps lost some of this Halloween spirit, because it's just kind of rubbish in the UK, unfortunately.
That's actually really sad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm the same as you in that, left to my own devices, as people probably have gotten by now, I will just watch horror over and over again because it's my favourite. Oh, barring the occasional pirate film, the occasional fantasy, but mainly it's horror for me.
Pirate film?
I have. I'm sorry, but I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I really.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about illegal downloads.
Oh no, bloody hell, Jesus! Talk about horror, not something devilish. I was very lucky in some ways because in my childhood my parents were very big on country traditions. And so we used to go around every year to a family who lived down the road from us, and we would do all the stuff. We didn't do trick-or-treating, because even then that was considered to be a little bit, you didn't know who you would be going round to. But what we did, all the bobbing apples and, pintail on a donkey and things like that. And, I remember one year we even did a kind of faux Ouija board, which I wouldn't recommend. For no other reason. And, I'm not talking about anything to do with the spiritual side of it, purely from the respect of, if you have a group of kids in a room doing a Ouija board obviously being something whereby supposedly it's a manner of talking to the dead. It's a very good way of making sure that if you have any kids, they don't sleep at night, because it will scare the living bejesus out. Seriously. We had an older girl with us who really took us for a ride and scared the living daylights out of me. But we did always watch a horror film. I remember first we watched High Spirits, the thing with Stephen Rea in it, which is actually quite a lot of fun. Very silly, very campy. But we also watched, the one I can really remember is watching Ghost Watch, which a lot of people, probably in their 30s now will remember. I think it was Stephen Voigt directed it. And the idea was that you had Sarah Green, a couple of people who used to be on kind of, I think, kids' news round, stuff like that. And they were going around to investigate a poltergeist haunting, or a supposed poltergeist haunting. And you would take them around, they'd kind of interview all the people who lived in the house, and you'd see the kind of bobbing apples there and stuff like that. And they had apples. Another game was you used to have apples that you'd hang on little bits of thread. and you would try and eat the apple, which of course, being on the piece of thread suspended from it, would bob away from you. And you would try and eat the apple out of this piece of thread. And you'd go around this house, and they'd be telling you the story of, I think it was meant to be this paedophile called, hey, back to paedophiles again. I know, but it shows how circular all this stuff is. We can laugh about it in that sense. This paedophile ghost called Pipes. And towards the end, I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. It is on YouTube, but please go buy it, because it's brilliant. It actually got very, very frightening. Now, I know people say, ho, I didn't believe it for a second. Yeah, but you're not necessarily the audience it was aimed at. To people who were kids at the time, it was terrifying. Genuinely. And I remember as soon as it was over, we all shot to our parents and said, oh my God, this has just happened, Sarah Greenspan, this, that and the other. And seriously, we all did. And it was a very good example of how Halloween, particularly the joy of Halloween, is about not even suspension of disbelief, but about the belief that something could be different, that we may not know everything. Forget about who you are at work. Forget about who you are when you walk around Asda of a daytime. And just think about everything you ever wanted to be true. In the sense of, what would it be the case of whereby you didn't die? And just that be it. Whereby your great-grandma, who you really loved and who used to tell you stories, or even who used to stink a fag ash, whatever it may be, could still be around. Seriously, could still be around, and there may be hope afterwards. Or that if you hear of a particularly brutal murder, that person may be given an extra life and serves a warning for the future if they become a ghost. That, to me, is what Halloween's about. It's not necessarily about believing, but about a way of saying, what if? And
Sure.
that's what that film did for me.
Surely it's just about filling up bags with sweets, right?
Vile boy! Have a slap.
I used to go trick-or-treating when I was younger.
Did you? Oh!
Didn't you?
No, we were never allowed. It was
at all?
considered something... No, seriously, it was considered dangerous. And we didn't want to do the... Seriously.
Probably true.
Yeah, I mean, there was one guy living around at the time who there were rumours about. I'm sure he was a perfectly nice old gentleman, but there were still rumours. And again, this is the whole thing about Halloween. Partly, yes, it's just fun. But in its oldest sense, there is danger there as well, and that's the fun of it. It's about looking at your boundaries. So you actually used to go trick-or-treating. Did you have an adult with you at all, or...?
No, but we only went up the street, so we practically knew everyone on the block.
Did you get lots of sweets?
Yeah, although one time...
Yeah?
No, but one time I remember being really disappointed because went to this residence which was inhabited by a couple of Scottish people, and I believe the tradition of in Scotland of trick-or-treating is that you're given apples. So you can imagine me as like a 7-year-old or whatever going to this door and this woman dropping an apple in my bag.
Oh.
It's like, oh, an apple, really? I found
you
out.
You said that so Americans like, really? Really?
Yeah. I talk to more Americans than I do English people, and it's really rubbing off on me.
Yes, in fairness, it really shows. It's just funny listening to you doing, like, you talk about Scots traditions, and it's all like, really? Like, it's so commercial here?
But, so I believe that's a Scottish tradition, but it made it been that woman telling me it was because she was cheap and didn't want to give any sweets. She'd run out of Milky Ways.
I must admit, I swear if I ever have kids, I will get them doing all the proper traditions, because it's so much about our psyche and about remembering where we've come from. And also it's a way of, I mean, the whole thing about horror films, again, as has been gone over endless times, a way of us coping with things and processing things psychologically, hence again the Jimmy Savile costumes, because people are seriously thinking, oh my God, I used to look up to you, you were amazing, you were on this TV show that I applied to get my wish granted and Jim will fix it. You know, it is partly this way of having really random fun and going out and doing something you'd never normally be allowed to do. And yet at the same time it does have that wonderfully delicious, devious, devilish undertone. Long may Halloween keep going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best elements of a holiday.
Exactly, Wanda. And a lot of people, especially when they get older, get the chance to get absolutely blasted on something vaguely like frolic in the thing saying, oh, it's a Bloody Mary drink. So yes, drink up to your spirits, drink up to whoever or whatever you believe in, and have a whale of a time, folks.
So from Halloween horrors to horror movies, we are now going to be joined by Filip Tegstedt, the writer-director of the supernatural horror film coming out of Sweden, Marianne, which has recently been released on DVD in the country.
It's such a different film to anything we really get over here, for one thing. Can you tell us, firstly, a little bit about it?
Well, yeah. Marianne is one of those movies. I started working on this in 2003. I think I got the idea in 2003, and then when I was in film school and I wanted to make a Swedish horror movie, because there weren't any real Swedish horror movies being made, because the Swedish Film Institute at the time, and still to some degree, don't really fund genre film, and especially not horror film, because horror film is not quality and it's not good because it's genre, you know. So I started thinking, well, what kind of horror movie would work, and why don't horror movies work? Because I've seen a couple of horror movies in Sweden, from Sweden, that try to, where the filmmakers have been watching a lot of American movies, and they try to make an Americanized horror movie, and it doesn't really work because we have such a different culture here.
Yeah.
In Sweden, we're really good at making kitchen sink realism. That's what we're doing, because that's kind of what our culture sort of is about, you know. That sort of realistic simplicity that you could put on film, that really works with our language and the social culture that is presented within the story. Marianne, I wanted to make Marianne about something Swedish, like Swedish folklore, which is something I'm really interested in, and like a Swedish kitchen sink realist horror. About a personal story about my hometown where I grew up, and that whole area, that particular neighborhood, and have it take place in sort of an actual place, a real place that exists. And it's metaphorically, Marianne is a very autobiographical piece about me growing up and the stuff that happened to me and the people, the kind of stuff that happened to me and the people around me, in my family and my friends, you know, things that people, it's a combination. In some scenes, one character does something and that's kind of reflects something that maybe I did or maybe someone else did, but it's not like one character is me. You know, they're all me and they're all everyone else. It's a combination. It's a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is. You know, it's about a man who is haunted by guilt, and at the same time a mare, which not the horse, but he's haunted by a creature from Swedish folklore called the mare, which is where the word nightmare comes from. And that's basically what it is. A mare, well, it depends on what, you know, Sweden is it depends on what part of Sweden if you're looking at folklore. I know you're interested in folklore. Different parts in Sweden have different explanation for what a mare is. It's a woman whose body is transformed at night, and she comes in and sort of haunts men. She rides their chest. She sits on their chest and gives them awful nightmares. And in some parts of Sweden, the woman is cursed. Like, if her mother was very afraid of giving childbirth, and she was afraid of pain, she could crawl 3 times through like the mucous membrane from a cow for like the what do you call it, the placenta? No, I don't know, whatever. So
Yeah.
well, yeah, from she could crawl 3 times through that, and the childbirth would be painless. But if she gets a daughter, she would become a mare, and if she gets a son, he would become a werewolf. So not like a Hollywood werewolf, but like a folklore type werewolf, like a shapeshifter.
Right, got it.
Oh, well, you know what a Hollywood werewolf is.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
something like the Howling or an American Werewolf in London or the Wolfman. That's a Hollywood
Yeah.
werewolf.
Right.
Folklore werewolf in Sweden is something a lot different. It's someone who can transform into a wolf, I think, at any given time. It's like a shapeshifter, basically, from Star Trek or something. I don't know. But so it's not like the way it always is in the movies about someone who is transformed every full moon and he's cursed, and you know, although that's a very interesting way of telling a story.
Yeah.
A mare is kind of more like that.
Yeah. So in terms of, I mean, the reason I'm asking this, I think I know, I must be honest, that I literally just so we can tease out the cultural differences, because to most people, like in England and I'm guessing in America, we, as I'm sure you know, view folklore very, very, very differently, generally speaking, which is really sad. But I mean, the idea of a shapeshifter, most people won't have a clue what that necessarily means. They'll be thinking of comic books.
Well, you've seen Cat People, right?
Yes.
You know, the movie Cat People, the remake.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the remake now. Yeah, I haven't seen the original. I really want to, though.
Yeah.
But they're like shapeshifters, and they can transform, right? And that's more like the way werewolves are, I think, in folklore.
Yes.
I think. I'm not, that much of an expert on this, but I think so.
So in terms of feeling, it's far more about a way of being as opposed to, I've got some kind of in a curse thing and I'm going to howl at the moon. It's far more about a thing of being controlled, yeah?
Well, yeah, because Hollywood werewolves are a metaphor. At its best, it's a metaphor for, the monster within. And being afraid of your, like, if you have a character and the character is a pedophile, that's kind of hard. It's hard to write a film about a pedophile. But if you write a film about a werewolf who kind of goes through the same thing, then it's easier for the audience to accept. Yeah. Because it's not as emotionally charged as maybe a pedophile is. So that's why we tell fantasy stories.
Yes.
Because it's metaphors.
Yeah.
A mare is kind of like that. It's sometimes it's a woman who's cursed like that, or sometimes it's just a woman who wants revenge for something. And there are different stories. There's one story about a mare. See, the mare can come into the house through any opening. If it's a small hole in the wall, she can come through there. Yeah. So in one story there's a man and he's being haunted every night by a mare, and he's having these awful nightmares. He wakes up, he's drenched in sweat, and someone tells him, "Well, you're being haunted by a mare." So one night before she exits the house, he gets up and he plugs the hole. Yeah. And she appears. She's still there, and she suddenly appears, and she kind of wakes up. She hasn't known that she was a mare. He introduces himself to her, and she introduces herself to him, and they talk, and sit down and have a coffee or whatever. And eventually, they get to know each other, and eventually, they even get married. So they live their life. They're married. They had, I don't know, kids or whatever. Yeah. And she's fine. Because he sort of woke her up from this curse or whatever, and she's now fine. But then one day they're having an argument, and he says, "Well, you didn't have that kind of mouth on you back when you were a mare, and I saved you or whatever, and he kind of reminds her that she was a mare, and she's poof, and she's gone, and he never sees her again.
Good girl.
And that's a real folklore story.
Wow.
And there are others. There are versions of that where he plugs the hole when she's on the way out. So she only has like 9 fingers or something because she was on her way out. So like part of her was gone already when he plugged the hole. And there are other folklore stories. Marianne is a mixture of all these things, and I've taken bits and pieces from different types of stories and put them in a modern setting, and I also try to analyze the real phenomena behind the mare, which is sleep paralysis and hallucinations that you get, like when you wake up before your body wakes up, and you're still paralyzed from sleep, which is called sleep paralysis. You have that every night, but sometimes you wake up before your body does, and that's a really scary moment to wake up because you're kind of half dreaming, half awake, and your body is giving you these hallucinations. You can lie down and be fully aware, but you're seeing someone standing in the doorway.
Yes.
And it's a really scary feeling. You get so it's one of the scariest things you can ever imagine. And you have the sense that someone is watching you. And this is a common phenomenon. It's called hypnopomp hallucinations. You can also have hypnagogue, I think, hallucinations, which is when you get that when you're falling asleep.
Yes. They're also known as night hags and night terrors over here as well.
Well, yeah. Night terrors, though, isn't that kind of like when you wake up screaming and you don't know why?
Not as much, as far as I'm aware. I mean, there may be slight distinctions. I mean, the one I know primarily in England is a night hag, where again, it's generally the night hag thing came from. It would be a little old woman, literally a hag or a witch, sitting on you or standing next to you.
Yeah,
night terrors, I think, kind of Yeah,
and also you have the succubus and the incubus.
Yeah.
And one of my favorites, when I was in grade school, when I was a kid, I used to read a lot about UFOs. And one of the most common stories by abductees were, I was sleeping in my bed and suddenly there they were in my room and I couldn't move, and they paralyzed me with some paralyzing ray, and then they took me out to their spaceship and whatever. And that's exactly it, except someone is talking about aliens and think it's for real. That's and this is really common thing. I used to hear these stories all the time when I was a kid, and I know that my mother, my dad died when I was very young, and we had a lot of problems with his father, my grandfather. To make a long story short, my mother found another guy when I was like 20, and they used to think that my dead grandfather they could feel his presence, and they woke up and they couldn't move, and I had to tell them that no, it's just sleep paralysis you're having.
Wow.
But it's very real. It's a very real thing to feel, and it's very scary. Yeah. It's completely safe, and it's very common. Like 60% of population, probably at least, can experience this every now and then or once. So it's an interesting thing. And if you look at horror texts, like everything from Paranormal Activity, you have that, where you have the story about how when they were kids, they used to feel, the thing watching them in their bed, and you have it in Dracula in the book, when he's you find it if you're aware of it, you can find it in horror texts, everywhere. But I haven't found anything made about the mare, which was kind of one of the things that I really wanted to do, because that's exactly what it's about.
It's a funny thing to do, really, in a sense. I think it's actually really effective because, as you say, I mean, I've had a lot of sleep paralysis myself in the past. It is absolutely terrifying. The only way to break it, the only way I've ever found to break it, if you can move one tiny finger, it snaps. But you have to do, you literally will make a sound. And the funny thing is, the actual, because it's often associated with high levels of stress. The interesting thing in that sense is where, particularly when we're talking about metaphor, where you become more afraid of the sleep paralysis or supernatural element or whatever else it may be that you're reading it as opposed to the stress of the situation that's causing it. How do you feel that works within the dynamic of Marianne?
Well, one of the things also that I think is important is anxiety. And anxiety is, you know, something that comes from guilt. Usually when you feel anxiety over something, if you kind of analyze it, why you're feeling this way, there's usually some amount of guilt in there that you lay upon yourself. And Marianne, you know, is about a man who is very flawed, and he was unfaithful to his wife, and his wife and his kid found out about it, and kind of drove him away, or he left. And then he comes back 10 years later, and he works as a teacher for at the high school when his daughter starts at the high school, and he kind of sees what she's become. Like, she's this really unhappy, you know, teenager. She's bullied, she's alone, she's sad. You have a guy who's feeling really guilty about what he's done and what he's doing, and he's got a lot of anxiety problems, but they're so beneath the surface of this, you know, because he's such a, you know, he's that kind of guy who never deals with his emotional issues. Yeah. So the whole mare thing is really him kind of losing it after being put through all this stress and all this stuff that's kind of going on in his life. And that's stress, you know, anxiety. You have the sleep paralysis, and that's the mare.
You're getting this tension between the supernatural and a very human story where you, even though the people may not be behaving in the way that we might like to think that we might, you really feel bad for.
Well, yeah. And, you know, there are two ways to analyze Marianne, if you will. You can see it as, well, he's being haunted by a supernatural being, or you can see it as he's being haunted by guilt. And well, either way works. To me, it was never about the supernatural. It was about the supernatural and the real kind of being the same thing, or different sides of the same coin. It's like the mare can be real and not real at the same time, because the effects it's having is kind of what makes it real. And I was always a major fan of Neil Gaiman and the Sandman comics. And they kind of work, I think, the same way, that you can see it as a metaphor, or you can see it as a real fantasy story, you know, depending on what you prefer. But I think the metaphor is more interesting.
Yeah.
How prevalent is, you know, the folklore in present-day Sweden? I mean, you know, the storytelling aspect of it. I mean, I imagine it's quite a generational thing.
Well, it's not like Iceland. In Iceland, it's very, you know, it's very prevalent out there. In Sweden, in the north of Sweden, you still have it. And where I'm from the central of Sweden, but the top 2/3 of Sweden is called the Northlands, and I'm from the right and the central, in a very small isolated town. And so when I was a kid, I had, you know, we call them the little people. They're kind of like hobbits. gnomes. There was a guy in my class whose dad he worked a lot. His father was actually like a shop class teacher at our school, and they were out a lot in the forest, and they did a lot of that kind of hiking and stuff. And the guy who was in my class, he told me that once he had seen the little people, and I know my grandmother, on my mother's side, did. She had seen the little people too. So it's still kind of around, and if you go out if you go out in the countryside, you can still talk to people who very much believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you go further north and stuff, but here in the south where I live now, it's like people don't even know what it is. So it's disappearing, and it's disappearing, and every generation it's people know less about it. So that was also one of the incentives to make Marianne. It's like I wanted to kind of document this before it goes away completely.
Oh God, yes. Thank you so much for doing it. Seriously, thank you. We need to retain this stuff. It really annoys me where people just forget. And it's so sad because it's so much about what makes who the hell you are. It's what you are, and it's amazing. Anyway, so my fangirl for folklore rant over.
well, no, you're absolutely right. And in Sweden, we have such amazing folklore in Sweden. We have, the creatures we have, it's like you wouldn't believe. There's Näcken, which is an old man, long beard, who sits naked in a stream, and he plays the violin. And you can go there.
Wow.
And he can teach you to play the violin, kind of like the way if you go to a crossroads, you can meet the devil, and he can play. It's kind of the same thing.
Wow.
And he will lure you into the water too, and horses and people. He will lure them into the water and drown them. So he's kind of, I wouldn't say evil, but like you wouldn't want to get too close to this guy. And then there's the skogsrå. That's probably my favorite folklore creature in Sweden after the mare. The skogsrå is a woman, a beautiful woman, and you can see. Well, she's not human, but you can see her out in the woods. And there are different types. Some of them look like humans.
Yeah.
Except when they turn around, there's a big hole in their back.
Oh my God! Right. Okay.
And some of them, sometimes they have a tail. Some of them have like slight fur, and they will lure you into the woods, and you won't be seen again. They're like sirens,
Yes, I was thinking about that. What happens to you when you go into the woods? What happens?
Well,
do you die? Do you go to another place? Or?
No, you get lost.
You get
lost.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And there's one called Gnoling, which is like a little child that, like, I don't know that much about that one, but it's like I think you can find him in houses, and he will like cry or whine. It's like a very small child. And you have the trolls, obviously, that they will replace people's children with their own, so that when they have a kid, they will replace their kid with the human child, so that humans, so kind of like the cuckoo, the way the cuckoo does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there are tomtar, which is like gnomes, like in David the Gnome. Kind of.
Oh, right.
The Swedish version of the Santa Claus is actually a gnome in the beginning. We call him the Christmas gnome, is what we call him. And he used to be dressed in gray, but they changed it, obviously, after the Coca-Cola thing. They changed it to red.
Yeah.
Have
any of these ever have the ideas ever scared you? I mean, do you actually, you talk about them with a lot of love, do they actually scare you as well?
If you're up north in Sweden, And where I'm from, if you go out into the woods late at night, like in the summertime when it doesn't really get dark, but you get this sort of twilight atmosphere, the way you have in Marianne. Like all the nighttime in Marianne is very twilightish, because that's what it actually looks like at night.
Wow.
You know the scene in Marianne where Sandra gets out the window and she rides her bike down to the lake?
Yes.
We shot that at 1 a.m.
Oh.
Yeah, in available light. And that's how light it is. It looks like day. And if you go further up north, it's going to be even brighter. But if you go out into the woods, and you can see some of that in Marianne when she sees the guy, when she's sitting on the lake and she sees the guys go. That's exactly what it looks like, and it is kind of a little bit scary to go out into, because you get this sense, that it's I don't know, it's this weird archetypal fear that kind of grips you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not even just about seeing the folkloric beastie. It's almost like the land itself becomes this magical realm the whole time, even though you've got this kitchen sink realism. The whole time it's kind of permeating through.
Right, and that was one of the reason why I wanted to shoot Marianne the way I shot it, with handheld camera and available light. Like everything in Marianne is available light. I wanted to have the documentary feel to it, to show that this is exactly what it looks like, and this is exactly how it feels to be in this environment. Yeah. And like I said, I grew up there. The house that Christer and Sandra is living in, that's like 2 blocks away from the house where I grew up in. And everything, all the locations in the film, in Marianne, is shot around there, and in the actual locations where, like, if Sandra was living there, and she would get out the window at night and get on the bike, it would take her 9 minutes to ride down to that lake. 9 minutes. Yeah. And the whole film is like that. So, like, this area exists, and you could totally go there and you can check out all these locations. Yeah. And it makes sense, because when you do get the scares, by God, they are scary. To be honest, I think I smacked somebody around the head when the bedroom scene, I smacked the girl who's sitting next to me by the head. I'm sorry, Rebecca. It works. Yeah, I don't think she was impressed. Well, it's. I think it's scarier also if you know this sleep paralysis fear. If you have it if you felt it, you can sort of see that and feel that. And if you're living with someone who is grinding their teeth after having seen Marianne, hopefully you will get something out of that too. Yeah, shake the poor bugger away, for God's sake. Yeah, really. It really works. That contrast, as we say, between the kind of very, very realistic elements and stuff that, to give you a comparison, think Sinister. It's Jesus, yeah.
It's interesting how you going back to the folklore, how you mentioned that it's the real beliefs that people have in it varies. It's very much a regional thing. It's quite interesting because you contrast it to religion, and that's also these days that's a very regional thing. I mean, you look in America and you look at the southern states, and how often that's a more much more religious place. It's interesting that from place to place, people's beliefs change. Yeah, absolutely. And we have like a small Bible belt in Sweden too, actually, in the south.
All right. Okay.
Much smaller though, obviously, because Sweden is probably, the entire country of Sweden is probably smaller than America's Bible belt. But I mean, it's like local culture thing, and especially when it's organized the way religion is organized. It's, that's an interesting point.
I was interested in that sense, in the way that the boyfriend, is it Sven? I forget. The boyfriend who comes
Stiff.
in the kind of... Sorry? Stiff, that's the
Stiff.
one. I knew it was an S. He's very, very funny, isn't he? I mean, what kind of reflection does he bring onto the whole kind of belief system? Because he's actually very funny, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Stiff is played by a friend of mine called Dylan. And he and I we've known each other for a few years, and we worked on this web TV series 2 years before I started making Marianne. And he's not an actor in the classical sense, and he doesn't really pursue acting, but he's really, really natural, and he kind of he brings something to a scene when he's very natural in front of the camera, and he's much better actor than you would think watching Marianne, because we talked about his character and the idea behind. There are a lot of ideas behind the Stiff character. It's based sort of on people that I've known. It's kind of based partly on a mutual friend that me and Dylan had, who had Asperger's. And so our kind of secret logic behind Stiff is that he's got a very slight case of Asperger's, but no one ever told him about it. And it's not like he's got a problem with it, but he does have some sort of problem recognizing how other people feel, which is his big tragedy as a character. And he's also kind of semi-based on this one guy I met once when I was, I think, 20 or 19. And I was talking to this ex-girlfriend of mine, and her boyfriend at the time came up to me and told me that he could read my mind, and he hadn't really believed it.
Yeah.
He was like this really weird guy. I can read minds, I know what you're thinking.
Whoa.
Yeah. There are a lot of people like that, and especially in small towns. And in small towns, you always have people who have that kind of nickname, and they're called Stiff, or they're called Stiffer, or whatever. They're always. And this guy that came up to me and told me he could read minds, his name was actually Stefan. So that's kind of where that got started, and I started calling him Stiff. Because there's a comedy duo in Sweden called Stefan and Christer, and I couldn't have the characters being called Stefan and Christer. I had to call him Stiff. Otherwise everyone in Sweden would say, "Hey," it would be too funny. Yes, but Dylan is like one of those guys. When he comes in front of the camera into a scene, he kind of changes the mood by coming into a scene. And you sort of see that, and he does this naturally, and it's very, very good when you have a film that's all about misery, and death, and even more misery, and feeling sad, and missing people who are dead, and people dying left and right, like family members dying. Then it's like you gotta have somebody who comes in and is some form of comic relief without being, too funny. But so I wrote this character Stiff for my friend Dylan, and told him that he could have it, and it's written especially for him. So that's kind of where it came from.
Earlier on, you mentioned that the film had been kind of labelled as elevated drama. And what would you actually, class the film as? And how do you think the lines blur between horror and drama? And if really they are perhaps one in the same, in a sense?
Well, it's so hard, To me, Marianne is a horror film because it has a monster, and it's all about it's all about the themes that horror films are about. It's about intrusion and sin and mortality and our bodies being machines that can totally break down. And this is what horror is about. And it has a monster. But that said, the A story, when you write a film, you have something called the A story, which is the major story arc that the whole film balances on.
Yeah.
And then you have B story, and you have C story, and you have different sort of, B story is usually, like a love story. And if Marianne had been a traditional horror film, then the way Drag Me to Hell is a traditional horror film. Then the A storyline would have been Christer being haunted by the mayor. And the B storyline would have been Christer and Sandra, father and daughter, and their relationship, and that would support the A story of the haunting. The way Drag Me to Hell is, the A story is the curse, and the B story is her relationship with a boyfriend. And her boyfriend doesn't understand her, and he thinks that she's being, unreasonable and going insane, and she doesn't know if she's going insane or not. It's kind of the same thing. But what I did, I wanted to do something that was more of a drama, because the film is such a personal story to me, and it's about. It was always really more about Sandra and the way that I felt losing most of my family actually died before I was 30. I still have my aunt, some cousins, and I have my sister, but most of my parents, all my grandparents died before I was 30. So I just wanted to write a story about what that kind of feels like when everyone is dying. So Sandra's story was kind of what that represented. So her story was very important to me. So I made the father and daughter conflict the A story. And in earlier drafts, the whole second act, like half the film, was more about Sandra. And she was also a main character, like a protagonist the way Christer is. But I moved away from that to focus on Christer. But the A storyline is still father and daughter conflict. And the B story is the haunting, which supports the father and daughter conflict. So technically, it's a drama. It's kind of complicated, but this is the way screenwriters think. So it's technically a drama, even though it's thematically and kind of structurally, in a way, a horror film. So it balances on that. And when a film, I heard this only a couple of weeks ago, though, nowadays, because this is kind of a trend now, especially in independent cinema, to make drama genres.
Yeah.
Kind of the way they do in South Korea, where every time you're watching a horror film in South Korea, it's a drama horror or a drama science fiction,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's a trend now, and they're calling it elevated genre.
Yes.
Apparently. So I don't know. I've always said it was a horror film, and most people, when they hear horror, they don't hear what I'm saying. They want to hear slasher. They want blood and guts, and Marianne was always more than that to me.
It's different. It's funny. I mean, I must be honest. I first saw Marianne at Leeds International Film Festival, and I'll be honest. I went back home. Well, I went back to the hotel that night, and there's a certain sound effect that goes through the film, a kind of rattling sound. It really gets into your brain, and the entire idea of the film, I got through, and I shouldn't really say this, but never mind. I got through until about 5 in the morning. I was meant to be going home the next day to teach. I got through to 5 in the morning. I hadn't slept a wink because it scared the life out of me. I just gave up and went home at 6 in the morning.
Well,
it scared the life out of me.
Well, I take that as a huge compliment. But a lot of people don't like being scared, and I say that when you're watching a horror film and you are scared that way, you're being, you know, affected by your film, and that's a great thing, you know, to see a film and being emotionally affected by it to the point where you can't sleep. That's a really great feeling, because, you know, you have changed in some way.
Yes.
You have, you know.
Exactly. It hit me that the clever thing I found about it, and it only really afterwards, I'll be entirely honest, it really, it burrows into your head, because it's so much, it's one of these things that when you first watch it, sure you think, okay, the boogie screamy moment, but it's not that gets you, it's the worry and it's the paralysis of that anxiety that you can identify with, especially shot so realistically. You don't get it out of your head. God, the next day.
Well, I'm glad. If you know, that actually makes me very happy, because it means that, well, in some way I succeeded, you know. So I'm very glad you're telling me this.
And you've got something else coming up as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I hope so.
Project?
I was contacted a couple of months ago by this girl, and she's written this personal drama thing we call it Break of Dawn. No, sorry, Break of Day. Sorry, I can't even say the title. Break of Day. That's the official international title right now. Break of Day. And it's about a girl who is in her 30s, who moves down to Stockholm, and she's a part-time musician, and she's trying to get out of her shell after having lost her 4-year-old son Lucas to cancer. So she's kind of struggling with this emotionally, and she's in a really bad state, and she can't really get out of it. And there are a lot of dream sequences in it, and thematically it ties into Marianne pretty well. Yeah. But it's a straight drama. There's no ghost, no mare, nor anything. And I'm producing this. And it's being directed by a girl called Jasmine Idun Lyman from Gothenburg.
Yes.
You know, we're trying to find financing for it, basically. And we might get it, we might not. We'll find out in November if we have financing. And if we do, we're going to go into production in January. And we're going to have it finished by November 2013 is the deadline for that. So it's a very quick project. Normally you would never make a feature film in 1 year, but this is a special case if we get this financing. If we don't, we have to figure out a new financing plan. We have a screenplay, and we have, you know, a cast, and we have a crew, and we're building everything, and we're just getting ready to go into production if we get the money. So I'm really hoping for it.
Is there anything that the people out there can do to help? Is there anybody that we can press gang for you? Because seriously, I want to see something else in the guide, Marianne. Seriously, guys, you need to do this.
Well, go to the official website.
Yeah.
Filmengryning.se, where you can see a short concept reel that we shot, kind of like a pilot trailer kind of thing. I mean, we're talking about working together with cancer organizations, which is very important to me because my mother died from cancer. So, I mean, and it's a terrible disease. And this is a really touching film. Most of it's like the ending of it is so really nice, so sad and so nice at the same time.
Well, with that, I suppose we'd better let you go. Thank you so much. That was actually really interesting. I actually learned a hell of a lot there.
Absolutely.
That was really nice.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope a lot of people watch Marianne now.
Yeah, they need to. Seriously, check out, the stuff on End It Cool. Ping this to your friends. Do it. You need to see this bloody film. Just don't, for Christ's sake, do something else before you go to bed, because you won't bloody sleep again. Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, it was a mess. That was such a mess. I was lecturing the next day. Don't let my boss hear this, for Christ's sake. Oh dear, but seriously, thank you so much and really well done.
Thank you.
So then, listeners, we really hope you've enjoyed this Halloween edition of the Geekeasy podcast. Thank you for listening. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my name is Dr. Karen Oughton, which is Dr. Karen Oughton, and I'm joined by the delightful
Adam Stephen Kelly. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, at BritGeekAICN, and be sure to follow Karen when she writes howl in 140 characters or less.
I do like trying to do things for, but it very rarely works because I just can't stop talking.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Okay, guys, so, right, we hope we'll hear from you again soon. Please feel free to ping us, telling us what you've liked and what you've been getting up to this wonderful, lovely Halloween. Until then, our next episode will be on
the 14th of November, and be sure to use our email address, thegeekeasy@yahoo.com, to get in touch with us, as well as Twitter, as we just said, and we look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. We shall see you then. Stay scary.
And happy Halloween.